and specifically its Peugeot Sport division have been on good form of late when it comes to building performance models. So we've got high hopes for this new 308 GTI. For a start, it's painted in two different colours, and let's face it, you wouldn't do that unless you were really confident it was a good car. But it also comes off the back of the RCZR Coupe and 208 GTI 30th Anniversary Edition, which were both little firecrackers. This 308 though needs to be a more rounded car, more in the mould of the Golf GTI. So things like space are still important. The 308 scores well here too, with one of the biggest boots in the class. However, while the rear seats fold down, you still get a big ridge in the floor. The big boot also means that space in the back is compromised. Legroom's not great, partly because these Peugeot Sport seats are quite chunky. Now, at this point, if it were any other 308, I'd advise looking at the SW Estate version because it's got a longer wheelbase, which equals more space. However, you can't have a GTI Estate, so it's a case of like it or lump it. Speaking of which, there's one of those in the floor too. Aside from the small glove box, storage up front isn't bad, and we do like the design and material choices. Then there's the driving position, which uses Peugeot's small steering wheel design. So rather than look through the wheel at the dials as you normally would, you set it quite low and you look over it. I do find the touchscreen slightly convoluted in 308s. For example, you have to go into the menus to select even the heater controls, which is just far too fiddly. But detailing in here is quite nice, it's quite discreet. You get little GTI badges, you get the sport seats, and down here by the gear lever is a sport button. Peugeot does offer a low-fat version of the GTI with a lower power output and smaller wheels and tyres, but when it comes to hot hatches, if you're going to be a bear, you may as well be a grizzly, which is why we're testing the top of the range 270 horsepower model. That's 270 horsepower, by the way, from just 1.6 litres. There's also 243 pound-foot of torque, all of which means the 308 GTI will get from 0 to 60 in 6 seconds and hit 155 flat out. Now, if you leave it in normal mode, the engine's a bit too quiet, but if you hit sport, you get a bit more volume and it sharpens up the throttle response, but still it's ever so slightly soft, and when you put your foot down, there's a slight pause between that and the engine responding. It then is a quick car though. I would prefer it though if this 6-speed manual gearbox had a slightly shorter throw. The 270 version also features bigger brakes and a mechanical limited slip differential on the front axle to help you put the power to the road. However, it also has Michelin Pilot Supersport tyres, which are quite focused, and you'll find that when you put your foot down, particularly in the wet, you do get a bit of wheel spin as it struggles to put the power down to the road. In the dry, meanwhile, there's just a bit of torque steer. I mean, it's all quite exciting stuff. It's not necessarily a complaint, but it is something to be aware of. The steering is quick, but rather numb in terms of feel, which is a shame because with a dedicated suspension setup, including a lowered ride height, wider front track and uprated springs and dampers, the 308 GTI is a very polished car. It's not just how agile or up for it that the 308 GTI feels, it's that it rides well enough and it's quiet enough to be a genuine everyday proposition. It's pretty clear that with this car, Peugeot benchmarked the Golf GTI because it feels almost as well built and just as well rounded. At about £28,000 for this top spec version, it also costs about the same. Thing is, in the Peugeot you get an extra 50 horsepower, and yet it still achieved the same 47 miles per gallon in official fuel tests, which equates to about 37 miles per gallon in real world driving. We started this review by saying that Peugeot Sport was on a roll, and this 308 GTI does nothing to change that. It might not have quite the same on-the-edge feel as its more recent offerings, but its considered blend of exciting performance and everyday practicality make it an enticing option. For a more extreme take on the hot hatch formula, click up here to see our Civic Type R review, click here to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and for detailed reviews of the latest cars